For the first time, Ukraine is receiving the longest-ranged projectiles ever handed over. The Western allies' new US aid package was approved, and in the smart bombs, about which there has been so much talk lately. What are they capable of? What does Ukraine need them for? Why did the US suddenly decide to supply Ukraine with them? And most importantly, with the step, Washington gives not just a green light but a direct opportunity to strike at Russian bases in Crimea. What does all this mean and where will it lead? I'm Oleksii Matsuka and we will talk about everything in detail right now. They hit right on target, destroying both equipment and military bases with accuracy up a meter. They strike from any angle. This is how ground-launched small-diameter bombs look like in operation. This is how the abbreviation GLSDB is translated from English. It's essentially a flight munition in aerial bomb that is equipped with the wings to allow it to glide on its way on the target and a rocket engine to increase its range. It's launched with the help of round complexes of the same type as the HIMARS, which bring is to sufficient height. But the Politico newspaper in a recent issue writes that the bombs cannot be launched using the launchers that Ukraine now has. New ones are needed. This is a joint project of the American company Boeing and the Swedish Saab group, and while the manufacturer did not come up with its proposal to the Pentagon, few people heard much about this weapon. So this weapon has been in development since 2019 in the US military warehouses. There is no shortages for rocket engines for this type and small diameter bombs, which are relatively inexpensive, more $4,000 a piece. This means that the ready-made smart projectile is relatively inexpensive and the main components are easily accessible. When will the manufacturer be able to supply cruise bombs to Ukraine? American military experts say that from the moment the US Air Force concludes a contract with a bomb manufacturer, the first deliveries should be expected no earlier than in 9 months. That smart munitions may most likely be in Ukraine by autumn. And preliminary, we can talk about several dozen according to the specialized American media.
A Foundation for Defense of Democracy's analysis said Ukraine could receive an initial delivery of 2 launchers and 24 weapons in as little as 9 months. From the Defense News publication.
This is not much, but by the end of 2024, up to 750 smart munition can be produced and transferred to Ukraine. The manufacturer needs time, but at the same time, according to US military sources, several test units have already been manufactured. So it's quite likely that within the framework of a large contract, Ukraine will be able to get them now. And how many do you need? Considering that these munitions are high precision, 2 cruise bombs are enough to hit a target and even several dozen, then with the help of a small batch of ammunition, Kyiv will be able to solve many military problems, most likely choosing the most important objects for strikes. Accuracy is achieved with built-in satellite navigation. And here is what the developers had to say about smart bombs to Reuters.
The GLSDB's technological advances make it potentially more effective. The navigation system enables it to be steered around obstacles like mountains and known anti-air defenses, unlike traditional artillery that follows a parabolic and towards its target. The weapon is also equipped to defeat some jamming attempts and has a programmable explosive. From the Reuters publication.
But for Ukraine, the most important thing is not so much all these technical advantages at the range. The range of such projectiles is up to 150 kilometers. This is, of course, less than the range of ATACMS They have 300 kilometers of range, but these missiles still remain in Kyiv's weapons request. But what's more than a range of traditional missiles for HIMARS, which have 80 kilometers of range. It's these munitions that have so far been supplied to the Ukrainian military. The new weapons will allow the armed forces of Ukraine to essentially double the strike range and hit objects that were previously out of reach. It's worth figuring out that targets Ukraine can reach if it deploys missile system with the smart bombs in settlements along the line of contact. Lugansk, Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, wing bombs will be able to hit targets in the depth of the occupied Donetsk and Lugansk regions and even reach the Crimea, of course not to the Crimean bridge, but the north of the peninsula falls into the radius. They will add flying ammunition to a headache for the Russian military and in terms of logistics. After all, with each new supply of Western weapons to Ukraine, they have to move their strategic facilities far from the front line, hide them even deeper in the rear. What can be attacked with such bombs is clear from the presentation video of the manufacturer. Supply bases and equipment that's almost any fixed ground targets. Experts explain. In order to hit moving objects, a missile must be guided from an aircraft or drone, and for this they will have to go into the zone of Russian air defense.
The 250-pound precision bomb could prove effective in rooting out reinforced Russian positions, such as trenches, and can be launched from hidden positions to avoid being spotted. But it is still smaller than the ATACMS munition, which is about 2 times heavier. From the Foreign Policy publication.
Is it possible to shoot down such a bomb? Yes, it is, but very difficult. The size is small, its diameter is 19 centimeters, the length is almost 2 meters, and detecting it is much more difficult than, for example, a cruise missile. This is also understood in Russia, since it was said that Moscow will consider the supply of long-range missiles to Ukraine as the US entry into the war. As you can see, the White House has crossed this red line marked by the Kremlin. What prompted the states to such a decision? Long-range systems are what the Ukrainian army is sorely lacking today. After the recent strikes on Konstantinovka and Kramatorsk, Zelensky once again called on partners to give Kyiv long-range missiles.
It would be possible to stop this Russian terror if we could provide an appropriate missile force for our military, so the terrorists do not have a sense of impunity. Ukraine needs long-range missiles, in particular, in order to remove this possibility of the occupier to place its rocket launchers somewhere near the front line and destroy Ukrainian cities with them. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine.
The restriction now is only one. It's important for the US that Western weapons from new supplies should not be used against Russian territory, and ex-US ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul even assures that Ukraine gives guarantees of this at the highest level. From what is voiced publicly, there is a promise from the Ukrainian Minister of Defense.
Ukraine is ready to provide any guarantees that US weapons will not be used for strikes on the territory of Russia. We have many facilities on the temporarily occupied Ukrainian land, and we are ready to coordinate the choice of targets with our partners. Oleksii Matsuka, Minister of Defense of Ukraine.
Interestingly, the Pentagon itself assured that this was no need to target approvals, and Ukraine will choose its own targets for smart bombs at our discretion.
We will be providing ground-launched small-diameter bombs to Ukraine. This gives them a longer-range capability, long-range fires capability that will enable them, again, to conduct operations in defense of their country and to take back their sovereign territory in Russian-occupied areas. When it comes to Ukrainian plans on operations, clearly that is their decision. They are in the lead for those. All along, we've been working with them to provide with capabilities that will enable them to be effective on the battlefield. Patrick S. Ryder, Pentagon Press Secretary.
To complete the replacement of depleted air defense system with Patriot and SAMP-T air defense complexes, new batches of IRIS-T and NASAMS, as well as weapons that hit 300 kilometers. This is a list of the weapons Ukraine needs to win, Defense Minister says. But this is the maximum program. We constantly hear from American diplomats and congressmen, both in off-record conversations and publicly, that it's important for the West not to provoke an escalation. Therefore, new weapons are not given all at once, but gradually, step by step. Assessing Moscow's reaction and only then making a decision on the allocation of the next aid package.
After the war has entered a more protracted phase, each subsequent step must be taken very carefully. There can be no abrupt or irresponsible decisions. So far, the conflict has been kept from escalating into a hot phase, to a certain extent, no matter how difficult it may be. And from a military point of view, this is the right decision, because it led to the fact that Ukraine was able to succeed. Both NATO and Europe at this stage have built a certain balance, and it wasn't easy. Marcia Kaptur, member of the US House of Representatives.
It's in this way, trying to maintain this balance, that Western politicians have gone from javelins and stingers to HIMARS and more recently to Patriots, tanks and armed vehicles. Every time they said that it was impossible, that it would provoke Russia, and then the weapons still ended up in the next package of military assistance, and even if it's not ATACMS yet, but already winged bombs. Maybe not 300, but already 150 kilometers, and because of the supply of these weapons, Russia will most likely have to change the tactics of hostilities. And here there are more and more suspicions that while Ukraine is waiting for new weapons and not only long-range missiles but also tanks, Russia can take advantage of this time and the window of opportunity. Experts at the American Institute of the Study of War make a conclusion that delays is providing Ukraine with Western long-range fire system, advanced air defense systems and tanks prevented Kyiv from using the Russian failures to the maximum extent and launching a larger counteroffensive.
If the West had begun to work on the full transfer of Ukraine to its weapons systems, when the need for this became obvious in the summer of 2022, conditions could be created allowing Ukraine to continue counter-offensive operations after Kherson and thereby deprive the Russians of the opportunity to regroup their forces and try to return own initiative. From the ISW report.
The forecast of the ISW analyzed is that in next 2 months Russian forces will probably go on the offensive, but it will end without achieving a decisive operational success, and by the middle of the spring the momentum of the offensive will be extinguished. And then the window of opportunity for the counteroffensive will already be with the armed forces of Ukraine, which by the time will have not received the promised assistance in full. Interestingly, in the US Department of State, when talking about Ukraine, they constantly mention the spring offensive. In particular, Blinken's key deputy Victoria Nuland spoke about it more than once at recent Senate hearings, processing apparently the inside information and not considering it necessary to hide it. But what about after the winged bombs? What kind of military assistance can Ukraine count on next? It's possible that the ATACMS may be further along, and this will be a direct path to the return of the Crimea, General Hodges is sure.
Timely supply of high-precision weapons will allow the armed forces of Ukraine to isolate the peninsula, cutting it off from the supply channels. The Crimean Bridge and the land road from Rostov through Mariupol and Melitopol. In parallel with this, it is necessary to regularly strike military bases in Sevastopol, Jankoy and Saki for several months in order to force Russia to withdraw aviation and naval forces from the peninsula. Ben Hodges, former commander of US Army Forces Europe.
If you follow the Hodges plan, then flying bombs will be very handy, but there will also be retaliatory actions from Moscow. Will the loss of control over Crimea be the very reason for Russia to use nuclear weapons? Hodges finds this unlikely.
I believe that the West did not want to provide some things because of exaggerated concerns about the escalation on the part of Russia. I don't think the Russians can really escalate, and so we need to stop holding ourselves back. Ben Hodges, former commander of US Army Forces Europe.
But the main way Western partners could not stop holding back and significantly increase their assistance is to give Ukraine the opportunity to deliver deeper strikes against Russia, and Philip Breedlove, former commander of NATO forces in Europe, insists of this. Will the US forego it? But question is still open. But as a high-ranking American diplomat admitted to me, at least it's already been discussed in high Washington offices. Not yet saying yes, but it at least already considering such an option. Well, what will happen at the front next and what to expect, we will definitely talk about in the follow-up videos 3 times a week on this channel. Thank you for watching and see you soon.